what I'm trying to say is I think that these proximate risks are a legitimate part of the conversation, even if you don't think that they're happening right now. That in the next 10 years there will be artificial, intelligence-induced technological unemployment, and that we need to have social policies that address them. And talking about private unemployment insurance is not the way to address them. And I think that part of the reason why folks want to skip ahead and say, well, let's only talk about catastrophic or existential risks of artificial general intelligence is because they don't want to talk about these short-term things.
Is it clear to you that we need a different response to people who get unemployed in the next 10 or 20 years because of automation than because of anything else? I mean, there's lots of other things that cause unemployment. Why have a different response to AI's induced unemployment?
Because if the scenario of technological unemployment comes to pass, which is sudden and relatively rapid declines in the proportion of the population that's in paid employment, and then the fiscal basis of the state through income tax begins to shrink, combined with the fact that
okay, so you're talking about a big event then, right?
Longer.
So you're saying if we have an event in the next 10 or 20 years that's much different than the events we've seen over the last century, then we will want a different response. That right?
Well, the kinds of social policies that I advocate have humanitarian, ethical, political rationales all by themselves. The expansion of the welfare state and universal basic income guarantee. But it's relatively hard for me and many people to imagine what a fair and plausible political economic future would look like with a scenario of technological unemployment, other than the expansion of the social welfare state to include something like a basic income guarantee. So yes, I think that's why we need to start
just to be clear, I was saying let's if minor changes in the next decade or two are less we should deal with in the way we've been dealing with similar things now, but eventually we have something big and that may require a different response. And you are saying, it seems to me, let's talk about what happens when there's a much bigger event, what different response to have for that.
Right, but I thought you wanted to skip ahead to evil genies jumping.
No, not necessarily. I just anything big and different.
Okay. So how big would So right now we've had a decline from 65% of the population in paid employment to 62% over the last 15 years. That's not huge, but if it went down to 50% over the course of the next decade, would that be big enough?
Not obviously, certainly, but I think eventually there will be a point when, say, within a 10-year period, basically pretty much all humans lose their jobs. And that's certainly a big enough event to be worth thinking about a different response to.
I would imagine so, yeah.
So, but, and that is the sort of thing that isn't right around the corner, but if you wait until it happens, it may be too late to do some things about it.
So we agree.
So the question is what to do about that then.
Right.
And one thing is, if we want to prepare for that event, we could sort of set up insurance against that particular risk. We could say, in the event where, say, basically less than 30% of world income goes to human wages, then we trigger this event where we say, aha, the robot apocalypse is upon us, and now the insurance pays out. That's a kind of insurance that could make sense against that risk. If you just set up a, say, basic income program now, it could cover that risk later maybe, but you're covering a lot more. You're paying out a lot in a lot other states of the world and a lot earlier. So I have a concern that what you have this basic risk that's the key thing that you want to deal with, and the solution is not that well targeted at it, although what solutions are politically feasible is limited, and so I could be convinced in the end that even a solution that's not well targeted is the best we can do because the other options aren't as feasible. But that's my first concern, is to set up some arrangement that's as well targeted as possible for the actual risk. So that would be an insurance that doesn't really turn on until lots of people losing their jobs, and then it also needs to be drawing on a world base of resources. If each local place tries to set up separate insurance like this, there's a problem that the new robot economy may not at all be uniformly distributed around the earth. It may be very concentrated in just a few places, and only those who have assets in those places will be able to cover these problems.
Well, on your latter problem, I mean, we socialists have long talked about whether you can have socialism in one country, and the experience of European social democracy in many countries, in fact, is that it is, in fact, difficult in a competitive global capitalist economy to have the kind of social welfare protections that you would like without having capital flee. So I think there is a question about the transnationalization of some of these policies. That's one of the reasons why I've long been a fan of the European experiment, such as it is now failing, but that hopefully what they would have been able to establish within the European Union, those kinds of policies. And countries like the United States are relatively big enough, hopefully, to establish policies without too much risk of capital flight.
But this is sort of the escalation that I worry about. You have a specific problem, and we need to do something about that specific problem. And then if you say, well, one solution to that problem is to have socialism, and you can't really have socialism unless you have global socialism. So now we need global socialism in order to solve this one problem. And you've really made your problem a lot harder, perhaps, by escalating it to these grand solution to everything. I would rather.
If you think that the solution is global socialism, which I do.
It's the only solution. That is, even if you think it is a solution, is it the only solution? Is it the easiest solution?
Is it the easiest solution? Well, right now it seems like barbarism is the alternative. I mean, we have a government right now that's coming in that is composed of corporate kleptocrats, religious fundamentalists, and generals, led by a fascist. And so, really, I do think that we need to start thinking seriously about some radical and otherwise more attractive options. But at any rate...
well, I don't necessarily share your overall evaluation there, but certainly this moment seems like exactly the wrong time to say now the solution is, full global socialism. I mean, because the world's moving the other way over the last few years.
That's precisely why we need to start talking about. Well, I mean, I've been talking about it forever, but and as have others. I think we've needed transnational governance since World War II in order to curtail the risks of the proliferation of nuclear weapons, and we haven't gotten it. And we started wars in Iraq, and we've been, chomping on our nails, waiting for North Korea to drop nukes on people ever since. And
so this is a basic
transnational governance
difference in you and I.
Necessary to actually establish collective security.
So my intuition or my style is to say I want to find a solution to a particular problem, and then try to minimize that solution or find the essence of that solution that I could propose to lots of people all across the political spectrum. And I say, whatever your other opinions.
Transnational governance is a good solution to a particular problem, such as the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction?
I might say, think about the weapons of mass destruction and think about what solutions can I offer to that would be acceptable for a wide range of people, even people who don't want to have global socialism. And similarly for AI risk, I might say for the AI risk that you and I could agree on, what solutions can we come up with that we might be able to get a lot of different people to buy into and accept, even if they won't accept, the grand solution you might want to everything. I mean, I might have grand solutions to everything too that I might like, say futarchy, which my favorite invented form of government, but I also don't think there's a huge chance that's going to happen soon enough to deal with these problems. So I'm also willing to set aside my favored solution and ask what sort of compromises that can we come up with that might